The courtroom smelled like floor wax and cold coffee, and my mother was on her feet before the judge had even finished reading the file number. "She's not well," she said, her voice climbing into that register I'd spent 30 years learning to brace against. "Your Honor, my daughter is unstable. She's been telling people she's some kind of financier. She lives in a one-bedroom in the East End. She's having a breakdown and she's dragging this family through the mud to get attention." I didn't move. I kept my hands folded on the table and my eyes on the grain of the wood. The judge took her glasses off slowly and looked across the room, not at me, but at the lawyer sitting at the other table, the expensive one in the navy suit who'd been hired with money that wasn't even real anymore. "Counsel," she said, "have you read the materials that were filed Tuesday?" The lawyer's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Do you genuinely not understand who your clients have been litigating against?" My mother's face went the color of the paper in front of her. I watched it happen in real time. The certainty draining out of her cheeks, the little tremor starting at the corner of her mouth. And for the first time in my entire life, she had absolutely nothing to say. "Let me back up. If you ever had a family treat you like the embarrassing one while they rolled out the red carpet for someone who was lying to all of them, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I think there are more of us than anyone wants to admit. My name is Maeve. I'm 31. And 6 weeks before that morning in court, I was standing in my kitchen watching my daughter's birthday candles burn down to nothing. We'd done it up properly, the two of us. Nora had wanted a forest party, which at 6 years old meant green streamers, a cake shaped like a hill, and little felt foxes I'd stayed up gluing together at the kitchen table the night before. I'd ordered too much food. I always do. There were butter tarts because my late grandmother's recipe is the only thing I can bake without burning. And there was a vat of hot chocolate going on the stove because it was the second week of November in Ontario, and the wind off the lake had teeth. The party was supposed to start at 2. My sister was supposed to bring my parents. By 2:30, the foxes had toppled over and Nora had stopped running to the window every time a car slowed down on our street. "Are they almost here?" she asked me. She had her party dress on, the one with the pockets, and she kept putting her hands in and out of the pockets like she didn't know what to do with them. "They're probably stuck in traffic, sweetheart. The 401 always works as an excuse. Everybody in this province believes the 401 can swallow people whole. But I'd already checked my phone. No calls, no voicemails. Just one text from my mother, sitting at the top of the screen like a stone. "Maeve, we're not going to make it today. Your brother-in-law surprised your sister with the BMW she's had her eye on, and we're all going up to the cottage to celebrate. Don't be difficult about it. She's only 6. She won't remember. Just light the candles and have your little party. We'll send something." I read it twice. Then, a third time, looking for the part where it became a joke. There wasn't one. The cottage. The lake. A new car for the daughter who already had everything. On the same afternoon, they couldn't be bothered to drive 20 minutes to watch the other one blow out candles. "We'll send something." They never did send something, by the way. I want that on the record. I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying about these people years ago, and I wasn't about to spend any more on them in front of my kid. I knelt down so I was level with Nora, and I tucked a curl behind her ear. "You know what?" I said. "I think the foxes want cake. I think they've been waiting all day." She looked at me with that careful, hopeful face children make when they're deciding whether to believe you. Just us. Just us and the foxes. The very best people." She almost smiled. And then my phone rang, and the name on the screen turned my stomach to ice, and I stepped into the hallway so she wouldn't hear. "What do you want?" I didn't say it like a question. My ex-husband laughed, that low, pleased laugh he used when he thought he'd caught you out. "That's no way to talk to the father of your child. You're 9 hours too early to wish her happy birthday and about 2 years behind on child support. So unless you're calling to fix one of those, I'm hanging up." "I'm calling," he said, "to do you a favor. My lawyer's filing Monday. I'm going for primary custody." I leaned my forehead against the wall. "You see her once a month when it suits you. You haven't paid a cent since she was 4. No judge in this province is going to hand you that child. See, that's where you're wrong. He was enjoying himself. I could hear it. I've got a 2-bedroom now. Steady job, a partner who's around. And you're a single mum in a rented apartment scraping by, telling everyone you got some big important career when nobody's ever seen you go to an office. The court looks at stability, Maeve. The court looks at what's best for the child. You don't know anything about what's best for her. Maybe not, but your parents do. He let that sit. Had a lovely chat with your mum and dad last week, actually. They're more than happy to come testify that you're erratic, financially unreliable, that you can't give Nora the life she'd have with me. Your own mother, eh? That's got a sting. The hallway tilted. I had to put my hand flat on the wall to keep the floor where it belonged. It wasn't just that they'd skipped a birthday. They'd done that before in smaller ways for years. It was that they were lining up to stand in a witness box and help a man who'd never once shown up for his daughter, take her away from the only person who ever had. They were going to use my small apartment and my quiet life, the small apartment and the quiet life I had built on purpose, for reasons none of them had ever once thought to ask about, as a weapon. Against me. Against Nora. You and my mother deserve each other, I said. My voice had gone very flat and very calm, the way it does right before I make a decision I don't take back. See you Monday, sweetheart. The line went dead. From the kitchen, I could hear Nora singing happy birthday to herself, softly, getting the words a little wrong, waiting for someone to come help her with the candles. So here's the part nobody in my family knew. When I was 22, fresh out of business school and broke in a way that teaches you things, I took a job nobody at the dinner table found impressive. I worked in special situations, distressed debt. It's not glamorous to explain at a barbecue. When a company borrows more than it can pay back and starts missing payments, the bank that lent the money gets nervous. Banks hate uncertainty more than they hate losing money, so they often sell that bad loan off cheap to people like me just to get it off their books. We buy the debt for cents on the dollar, and then we own it. We own what the company owes, and this is the part that matters. We own whatever the company put up to guarantee it. By the time I was 30, I wasn't an analyst anymore. I ran the fund. My name was on the door of a quiet office on Bay Street that I never once mentioned at a family gathering. Because the one time I'd tried when I was 26, my mother had patted my hand and said, "That's nice, dear. But when are you going to get a real job and find someone to take care of you?" So I stopped telling them. I let my sister be the success story. I let my brother-in-law be the golden boy with the loud watch and the louder opinions and the hospitality group he was always raising money for, boutique spa hotels, the kind of places that charge $400 a night to put a cucumber in your water. I let my parents think I was the daughter who hadn't quite figured it out. It was easier. It was, I told myself, more peaceful. I bought a modest apartment, drove a 6-year-old Honda, and quietly built something that none of them could touch because none of them could imagine it. I genuinely thought I'd take that secret to the grave. Then my ex-husband threatened to take my daughter, with my parents holding his coat. That Monday, after I dropped Nora at school, I did something I'd never let myself do. I went into our internal system and I looked up my brother-in-law's company. I told myself it was just curiosity. It wasn't. The hospitality group was a disaster. I could read it the way you read a face you've known your whole life. Revenue down 3 quarters running. 2 of the locations quietly shuttered. He'd taken out an enormous commercial loan 18 months ago to keep the lights on and keep up the show, the cars, the parties, the surprise BMW, and the loan had gone bad almost immediately, missed 3 payments. The lender, one of the big banks, had done exactly what banks do. They'd packaged up that ugly defaulting loan and sold it to a secondary buyer to cut their losses. I knew the buyer. I knew it before the name finished loading, because I felt the floor go strange again, the same way it had in the hallway. The buyer was my own fund. We'd bought a tranche of distressed commercial paper that spring. I'd signed off on it myself without ever looking at the individual names inside it, the way you sign off on 100 things a quarter. My brother in law's debt had been sitting in my portfolio for months. I owned what he owed. I owned the lien on his business. I owned his future. And he was at the cottage, drinking to a new car. I sat there for a long minute. And then I opened the collateral file because banks don't lend that kind of money to a guy with a cucumber water empire on a handshake. There's always something behind it. There's always a guarantee. When the address came up, I read it 3 times. It was a property in Muskoka, lakefront on Roseau, the side of the lake where the boathouses cost more than most houses. Cedar siding, a dock, a stone fireplace. I had 100 childhood memories tangled around. My parents' cottage, the one thing in the world they loved without condition. The place my mother called the family's legacy in a voice that made it sound like a cathedral. They had remortgaged it, quietly, without telling anyone. They had put up the cottage, the legacy, the cathedral, to personally guarantee my brother in law's loan, to bankroll the golden boy. The same week, they were planning to testify that I was the unstable one who couldn't be trusted around money. I closed the laptop. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I'd expected them to shake. I'd love to tell you I went straight to my desk and pulled the trigger. I didn't. I sat in my car in the underground lot for 40 minutes first. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being handed this kind of power. It doesn't feel like the movies. It felt like standing at the top of a staircase in the dark, knowing exactly how many steps down it goes. I could call in the loan. I could move to seize the collateral. With one set of filings, I could take the cottage, take the company, take everything my parents had built their whole sense of themselves on top of. And they'd never even know it was me until it was far, far too late. And there was a part of me sitting in that cold concrete garage that just wanted to close the file and walk away. Not out of mercy exactly, out of exhaustion. You spend your whole life wanting your mother to look at you and see something worth keeping, and some quiet, stupid, 6-year-old part of you keeps the porch light on for that even after you've grown up and changed the locks. But then I thought about Nora at the window. Are they almost here? I thought about a man who'd never paid for a single pair of her shoes, telling me, with a smile in his voice, that my own parents had volunteered to help him take her. I thought about the word erratic. I thought about a witness box. And the staircase stopped being frightening. I went back upstairs. I called my head of legal, a woman named Lena, who has never once been impressed by anyone and is therefore the only person I fully trust. And I told her I wanted to acquire full assignment of a specific lien out of our spring tranche, personally, cleanly, with every I dotted because this one was going to be looked at. Then I did the part I'll never forget for as long as I live. The internal transfer system needs a value for the assignment, a real number on the record attached to the filing forever. I could have put anything. I put my cursor in the field and I typed a 1. I put a decimal after it. I added 2 zeros, $1, 1 loonie, the price of a coffee at a gas station, less now with how things are. That was the legal consideration for which I took ownership of every claim against my brother-in-law's company, and behind it, the cedar-sided cottage my mother called a cathedral. A Tony would have been overpaying by half. The system asked me for a memo line, a note that gets stapled to the filing and shows up on the formal default and demand notices, the ones that get printed and couriered to the debtors, something they'd see. I thought about a felt fox tipped over on a kitchen counter. I thought about candles burning down to wax. I typed, some things are worth more than $1. Children's birthdays, for instance. And I hit enter. I'd love to say the wheels turned fast after that. They didn't. The law is patient, which is its whole personality. For 3 weeks, nothing visible happened. My brother-in-law posted photos from the cottage. My sister posted the BMW. My mother sent me a single text asking if I'd calm down, which I did not answer. And on a Tuesday, the demand notices went out. I know exactly how it landed because my sister called me. and for once in her life, she was the one whose voice was shaking. Maeve, Maeve, something's happened. You have to. Mum's losing it. The bank's calling about the cottage. There's lawyers. They're saying we defaulted. They're saying somebody bought the loan and they're calling it in. And she stopped. Breathed. Can you lend us some money? I held the phone for a second. Outside my office window, the city was doing its grey November thing. The lake somewhere past the towers. You want money, I said. It's the cottage, Maeve. They're going to take the cottage. Mum can't. You don't understand what this would do to her. How much do you need? A pause. I think she actually believed in that moment that the boring sister with the rented apartment was about to find a way to scrape it together. It's almost 2 million with everything. But even just to stop them, the lawyer says I don't have $2 million in my couch cushions. No, I said. I thought I was the unstable one. I thought I couldn't be trusted with money. I thought you'd all be testifying about that on Monday. The line went very quiet. What did you do? My sister whispered. I didn't answer her. I hung up. The custody hearing and the foreclosure didn't happen on the same day by accident. My ex-husband had filed for Monday to twist the knife while the family was riding high. He had no idea the family was about to be on the wrong end of the largest financial catastrophe of their lives. Neither did my parents. They walked into that courtroom thinking they were there to help take my daughter, dressed for it, my mother in the navy coat she saves for funerals and important occasions, and to them this was both. Their lawyer was good. I'll give him that. He built a tidy little story about the erratic single mother and the stable, loving father, and he had my parents lined up as character witnesses to nail it shut. He just had one problem. He'd built his entire case on the premise that I was broke, desperate, and lying about a career that didn't exist. My own lawyer, not Lena, this was the family side, a quiet older man named Desmond who'd worked with me for years, said almost nothing for the first hour. He let them talk. He let my ex-husband describe my apartment like it was a crime scene. He let my mother stand up and say I was unwell, that I was telling people I was a financier, that I was having some sort of episode and dragging the family through the mud for attention. That's when the judge took off her glasses. Counsel, she said to my ex-husband's lawyer, have you read the financial disclosure filed by the respondent on Tuesday? He hadn't. You could see he hadn't. Your client and these witnesses have spent the morning testifying that this woman is financially unstable and possibly delusional about her career. The judge picked up a thick stapled document and held it like it weighed something. This is an audited statement of her assets and her directorship of a registered Ontario investment firm. It has been verified. Do you genuinely not understand who you have spent the morning calling a liar? My mother was still standing. I watched her hear it. I watched the navy coat certainty go out of her face like a tide going out, all at once, leaving everything underneath exposed and grey. My ex-husband's lawyer started to say something about relevance. The judge cut him off. What's relevant, she said, is that you brought a custody claim built on the premise that the mother cannot provide a stable home, supported by witnesses claiming she's financially unfit. The mother appears to be one of the more financially capable people in this room. The father is 2 years and roughly $40,000 in arrears on support for the very child he's asking me to hand him. She looked at him over the top of her glasses. Would you like to continue, or would you like a recess to reconsider your position? He took the recess. He didn't come back with a custody claim. He came back with a payment plan for the arrears, which the court ordered with interest, and a supervised visitation schedule he'd have to actually show up for to keep. I'd spent 2 years afraid he'd take her, and it ended in an afternoon with a number on a page he hadn't bothered to read. My parents didn't testify. There was nothing left to testify about. As we filed out, my mother caught my sleeve in the hallway, and for a second her face did something I'd waited my whole life to see, something soft and frightened, and almost like she was finally looking at me. Maeve, she said. The cottage. The lawyer says somebody bought the loan, somebody's calling it in, and I don't. Can you help us? You have to help us. We're your family. There it was. We're your family. The card they'd kept in their back pocket my whole life. The one they played whenever they needed something and never once when I did. You put the cottage up for him, I said. You bet the legacy on the golden boy and you didn't tell anyone. And then you got dressed up to come help a man who's never paid for his daughter's shoes take her away from me. I gently took my sleeve back. I am your family. I've been your family the whole time. You just couldn't see anything that wasn't holding a louder watch. I didn't tell her it was me. I never have. I think part of her suspects. I think living with the suspicion, never quite knowing, is its own kind of justice, cleaner than a confession would have been. Here's where everyone ended up, because I know you want to know. My brother in law's hospitality group folded inside 2 months. The spa hotels were sold off, the cucumber water and all. He'd personally guaranteed pieces of it, which meant the BMW went, the watch went, the lifestyle that had bought him a seat at the head of every family table went with it. My sister, who had spent her life being the one things were given to, discovered that she'd married a man who was very good at being given things and not much else. They're renting now, a townhouse off a highway, both working jobs they'd have wrinkled their noses at 2 years ago. The cottage, the cathedral, the legacy was foreclosed and sold. I let it go to market and didn't buy it back, though I could have easily and kept it as a trophy. I didn't want it. A place is just a place when the people in it never once made room for you. My parents moved into a condo of fraction the size, in a building with a name that's trying too hard. And from what I hear, my mother still tells people they downsize by choice. And Nora and I went up north for her 7th birthday, to a rented place on a different lake, smaller, with a wood stove and a dock that needed a coat of stain. I invited the people who'd actually shown up over the years, Lena, who is godless about most things, but soft about my kid. My friend Sanvi, who's been my person since business school and once drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to sit with me when Nora had croup, her wife June, a couple of others, chosen, every one of them, bound by something stronger than the accident of sharing blood, by showing up over and over when showing up cost something. There were felt foxes again, Nora insisted. We made the hot chocolate on the wood stove and it tasted like smoke, and it was perfect. At one point, she leaned against me on the dock with a marshmallow stuck to her chin and said, "This is the best birthday." And I had to look out at the water for a minute so she wouldn't see my face. I'd carried these people on my back for 31 years. The weight of always being the one who wasn't enough, the one who hadn't figured it out, the one who got, "will send something instead of a seat at the table." And I'd set it down for the price of a single dollar. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you first, if you've ever sat in a cold parking garage trying to decide whether you were allowed to stop keeping the porch light on for them, I want you to hear this, because I needed someone to tell me and nobody did. You don't owe a return on investment nobody made in you. Blood is just biology. It's not a debt and it's not a leash. The people who measure your worth by what they can take from you will always, always find you wanting, because the wanting is the point. It keeps you reaching, so stop reaching. Build your life somewhere they can't reach, with people who clap when you walk in instead of checking what you're wearing. Set the boundary. Let them call it cruel. Let them say you've changed. And when someone shows you again and again that a flashy stranger matters more to them than your child's birthday, believe them the very first time. It will save you years. I'm so glad you stayed with me through all of it. If this story moved something in you, you know what to do. Like it, subscribe to the channel, and if you've got a story of your own, the kind that took you a long time to be able to tell, leave it in the comments below. I read them. We're a strange little family down there, and unlike the other kind, this one's by choice. I sat on that dock with marshmallow on my sleeve from Nora's chin, and I thought about how a single dollar undid 31 years. It wasn't the money that did it, though. The dollar was just the last domino. Everything that fell, fell because of choices people made long before I ever opened that file. My parents put the cottage on the line for the loud one because they'd spent a lifetime believing that worth is something you wear on your wrist. My brother in law borrowed against a fantasy because he'd never once had to live inside the truth. My ex husband thought he could take a child he'd never paid a cent to raise because nobody had ever held him to a single thing. None of that was bad luck. It was the harvest of seeds they'd been planting for years, and when the season came, they reaped exactly what they'd sown. And here's the part I want you to sit with, because it cost me a long time to learn it. I didn't win because I was the smartest or the richest. I won because of three things, and you can build all three starting today. The first is doing right even when it's invisible. For years, I kept my word to a 6-year-old when there was nobody around to applaud me for it, and I never once used what I knew about people to hurt them for sport. When the power finally landed in my hands, I'd already decided long ago what kind of person I'd be holding it. That decision is made in the quiet, not the courtroom. The second is paying attention. I didn't conjure a fund out of thin air at 31. I read the boring documents nobody else read. I learned how money actually moves while my family was busy being impressed by it. Knowing how the world works isn't a talent you're born with. It's a habit you choose, one dull afternoon at a time, until one day it saves your whole life. The third is the one I'm proudest of. I kept getting up. After the broke years, after the divorce, after every will sense something. After 40 minutes alone in a cold parking garage trying to decide if I was even allowed to stop hoping. Nobody handed me the strength to keep going. I built it the way you build anything, by carrying a little more each day than felt comfortable. So if you're the one they call the failure, the unstable one, the one who hasn't figured it out yet, be honest when no one's watching. Learn what others can't be bothered to, and refuse to stay down. Do that long enough, and you won't need to crush anyone. You'll just look up one ordinary morning and realize you've quietly outgrown the people who only ever measured you to make themselves taller.